Hello, Teresa Baker here. I'm going to talk to you today about data entry inside REDCap and the different possible ways you could get your data into the program. So on there's really three different ways you can get your data into the program. Let's start by talking about the forms themselves. You can have a staff enter the form or a researcher enter the form by logging in to the system, and then they would locate the record or create a new record, and they would put the data in to the system from within REDCap. This would provide an audit trail and connect the person that is logged in with the data that's being entered and a timestamp. Using your user rights is when you would limit what that person that's entering data can and cannot do. The other option is for your participant to enter the data. In this particular case, your participant does not log into REDCap. Instead, they are sent a link, and that link can send them to a web page, and at that point, they are entering information which will go into the table. So there are a few different options that we kind of need to, or nuances within both of these types that I kind of want to talk about. And then later on, I'll talk about the third type. So let's for now just focus on surveys. When you're talking about surveys, what you mean is that you're going to send a link to that person. And then that person opens the web page to fill the items out. It's secure. The information does not stay on their device, and the participant or person entering the data cannot hop from one record to another record. So there's no way for them to see another participant's record. So at the most basic level would be using that public link, or you could even use an invitation inside the survey distribution tools to a personal, someone you know, and you could put their email in. And if the email sends them an invitation, what that does is it sets up a public link inside that invitation. In both of these cases, you kind of need to consider what you're doing in terms of confidentiality and uh, anonymity. So it's very common for us to write down in our protocols that we are collecting information anonymously, but that doesn't mean that anonymous and confidential data are two completely different things. And so you have to really think about what you're really doing. Most of the time, we are actually collecting data confidentially, not anonymously. There are a few cases in which anonymous is what you really are doing. And if you're doing that, you need to really think about the setup of your project and all of the tools and pieces. So just to consider it, when your data is collected anonymously, it means that no identifiers are collected. And so the system that you're collecting it in, you have to make sure that it's not storing the IP addresses on the back end. REDCap does not do that if you're using the survey mode in the public link. So it's unlinked data, there's no IP address that's captured. And it truly is anonymous if you don't have the participant connection built in. It's common that people that are collecting data anonymously tell the participants how the data is going to be used and how it's going to be stored and how it's going to be analyzed and that kind of stuff. If you are saying that your data is collected confidentially, that means that you do have some type of identifiers somewhere in your project. That doesn't mean that you're at the end, you might house and hold a de-identified data set at the end, but as you collect it, you might have identification. Automatically, if you are collecting data face to face or over the phone or in any way, shape, or form where there's a way for you to know who that person is entering the data, it's automatically confidential, not anonymous. So if you have any kind of email connection enabled, it would also be considered confidential. And similar to anonymous data, it's both stored it's both analyzed in a group level analysis The difference would be is when it's time for you to analyze it, you would go and de-identify it. Okay, so let me just take a moment to talk about what happens when you click on a public link versus what happens when you click on a private link. Because I would say this is one of those most misunderstood components of how the links work. If you have a public link, I don't care if it's anonymous or if it's identified. If you have a public link and an anonymous person clicks the link, you're creating a new record when that person has a save function of some kind or a save action. So a save action in this case could be the submit button or it could be the next page button. It does have a partial submission if you do next page. If you are sending in the survey distribution tools, if you are sending a specific person an invitation to take a survey, so you know who they are, you've identified them and you're sending them an email. When you send that email, you're sending them a public link. There is no record attached from that survey to the database until that person has a save function. So in both cases, you are forming a new record when a save action occurs. Until a save action occurs on that public link, that record is not in your database. It's not there. There's no way for you to connect. So I think the easiest way to say it is a survey can go to a database. The database cannot go to a survey. So a survey can go to a database. A database cannot go to a survey. I probably should have put a great big sticker of that right here on this page. The difference being you have the ability to link an identified email on the front side, but if you do not do it on the front side, it will be considered anonymous and it will be unlinked on the back side. And we'll talk about that a little more later. Now, if you're wanting to use a private link, what you're saying here is that the person is already inside your database. They already have a record. Maybe you came in and you entered the person in, and now that they're in your database, now you want to send them a link so that their information can come back and it gets added to their existing record. So this is a private link. A private link would be belongs to their survey or it belongs to their queue or those types of items. Those are unique to that person and those are the ones that should not be shared among other people. So a private link is a link that already exists in the database. That record is already there. A public link, the record is not in the database yet. Okay. So let's talk now about how you would enter the data into REDCap if you were doing it from a researcher perspective. In this case, the researcher logs in to the project or into the system, opens the project they have access to, and the correct one that you would be entering data into. You have the choice of using the record status dashboard to locate your record manually and open it up and get to where you want to go. Or you could, there's a button in the record status dashboard that says add new record. You could do that too. Another option for you is to add, go from the home screen, you could go to add edit record, and you could add a new record there. You could manually look a record up in the drop-down box, or you can do a query for an existing record and look up something that way. And we're going to do this when we practice in a few minutes. Now, it's kind of important to understand the different icon symbols and what they mean. If you are doing a data entry, that's these buttons on the left-hand side. So a data entry form. So you're the researcher, you've logged in. Red means incomplete. If you have data that's been saved, even if you open and save and there's nothing in there other than you opened and saved, the minute you save something, it automatically gets a red dot that's indicating something is there. It might just mean that the survey was opened and saved. That doesn't mean that you've entered anything, but it could be a partial response or whatever. Now, you get to decide when you're going to change it from incomplete to unverified or complete, and you get to decide what unverified means for you and your project. And then complete, you get to decide when something is considered complete and you wouldn't want to do it anymore. Now, the difference is for these other two here, for this orange check mark and this green check mark, if your bubble has a check mark in it, it means that the form was completed in the survey mode. And that's kind of important to know because in the event you have to edit um, your items, you would need to have the ability to edit a survey, which is not always there. Sometimes you have to go back to the user rights and click that option. And sometimes if you're using eConsent module framework, you would have to have that ability inside the eConsent module framework. So it's another place where you could have certain researchers with the ability to edit a form, but maybe not a survey because what the participant says comes first. But then maybe there is really an error from a data entry standpoint and you want it fixed so you don't have to deal with it from an analysis standpoint, in which case you would mark that who's adding. And for the surveys, every contributor that puts in from a survey standpoint, including someone that is coming at it from a data entry standpoint, goes into a contribution tab. Okay, the last way that we could get data into our database is through importing our data. So when we import our data, you can do it a few different ways. There is a template that is available. You can download the template and you could start with no data at all and you can just upload all your data. Commonly, though, you have partial data that's already in REDCap and you need to just add more to it or maybe pieces that are missing or something like that. What you would do in that case is you could export your existing table. You could add a new row. Here we're adding a row. You just have to make sure a few things occur. The first set of rows or the first set of columns will always be REDCap's variables. And depending on your structure will depend on how many rows you are. A classic database without a repeatable instance is going to have one column. A classic database with a repeatable instance would have at least 3 columns. And if you have a longitudinal one, you could have 4 columns. So you just need to pay attention to the structure of your specific database. And the best way to tell that is by either exporting your current data or by going to the template and exporting a template. So the thing about adding rows is it's usually best to only add the information, whether that's a column or a row, so whether it's a brand new record or maybe it's information from a specific instrument. I see this a lot of times with people that are uploading clinical data, like maybe the participant already had their visit and now you want to add the lab information to that visit. And so you just want to upload the labs so they match with the person. You would do all the matching and all the components of that piece outside of REDCap. And then when it came time, you could upload just the columns that you need that are not empty. And you would get rid of the rows that are empty. And you can either match it with an existing record or you can make a new record with a new record number if you wanted to. The important thing to remember is that you have to save the file as a CSV file. And when you go to upload it, it's going to make you do an adjudication process. So you have to remember when you do the upload to scroll to the very bottom of the page and hit the import button if you really do like what it's doing. During the adjudication phase, it does have some components where it's going to tell you if you did something right or wrong or that kind of stuff. So at this point, what we're going to do is test our database, our project. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to make that a different video. So I'll be back.